What's up, investors? Welcome to the channel where we're talking about the semiconductor industry. Before I get started, make sure you check out the description below and check out the Webull link. If you don't already have an account, you can get 2 free stocks with that. Just sign up using that link below. You'll get 2 free stocks. So let's dive into the impact that the war between Russia and Ukraine are having with the semiconductor industry, because that is the big news here. So right off the bat, all of the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, Korea, Australia, and a broad other group of countries are saying none of us are going to sell to Russia semiconductors, certain technologies, military equipment, civilian aircraft and engines. And of course that includes the United States. But the key thing here is none of those countries are going to sell Russia semiconductors. So what's the impact of this? So the recent sanctions on Russia will prevent advanced semiconductor sales to the country, as we know. Now, investors shouldn't necessarily fret about this. Russia only accounts for only about 2% of global PC and mobile phone shipments, along with about 1% of server shipments. So a very small percentage here, which bodes well. And to continue along with that, citing a report from investment banker Bernstein, MarketWatch proceeded to point out once again, so this is a confirmation, that Russia accounts for less than 2% of global PC shipments, roughly 2% of handset and smartphone shipments, roughly 1% of server shipments, and roughly 2% of automotive shipments. So the Russia and Ukraine combined, they're saying, don't make up even 3% of the market for semiconductors. So that's good. So the fact that we're not selling to Russia, at least, they're making up less than 2% or about 2% of the industry anyway. So not too much to worry there. But let's keep going here. So now this is a little bit concerning for us. So chip makers need to diversify their supply chains as the U.S. braces for potential retaliation from Russian sanctions. So just like we're putting sanctions on Russia, they're going to just do it back to us because, whatever they do have, they're going to do what we're doing back, right? So the industry is heavily reliant on materials critical to chip making in Russia and Ukraine. Didn't know this, but it is. So over 90% of U.S. semiconductor grade neon supplies come from Ukraine. Now, so that's a little bit troubling. And I do think I have an article here that's going to touch on that in a minute. So neon is this key material that's used for the lasers that actually make the chips. That's a byproduct of Russian steel manufacturers. Also, 35% of palladium is sourced from Russia. Palladium is used in sensors and memory, as well as storing energy and broadcasting equipment, mobile telephones, computers, and other sources. But once again, one of the bigger chip makers in the industry, Intel, said, we're not anticipating any impact on the neon supply. So they didn't say anything about palladium, but as far as the neon supply, Intel's saying they're good. And I'm actually going to, let's read this first here. So there's a news agency, let me just make sure I didn't skip anything. So a news agency, Euractiv, noted how the production of neon, palladium, and C4F6, no idea what that one is, but these are 3 materials that are vital to the semiconductor processing and irreplaceable for microchips. So it could be impacted by the situation, naturally. So neon in particular, which is used in laser engraving pathways on microchips, comes largely from Russia, where it's produced, by way of Ukraine, where it's purified. And so Russia has the palladium and the steel that Ukraine then purifies to make the lasers, I guess. So for sale to semiconductor companies abroad. So once it's done in Ukraine, then, like as we said, they produce 90%. So we're going to have to figure out how to go about that. Now these supply chains are being disrupted, and as Euractiv says, this is going to exacerbate a semiconductor supply chain in an already strained due to the increased chip demand. So palladium supplies are also a concern, as Russia produces 37% of global palladium. So let's look into that one a little bit. So other countries with palladium apparently. So I'm not sure what this is. So metric tons. So Russia here, at least in 2020, they made 91 metric tons of it. I don't know how much the industry needs, but we have other sources here in South Africa who make 70 tons, at least in 2020. Canada made 20, we made 14. So we have it. Other countries have it. So yes, Russia makes a ton of it, but it seems like other countries have it that we're on good terms with. So I'm actually not too concerned about that one. And as far as, let me just wrap this one article up. So semiconductor companies don't seem to be worried, at least in Europe. So Europe's STM Microelectronics said none of our suppliers had reported any potential impact from the conflict on raw material supplies. But Euractiv says that could change over the next 6 to 12 months. So how long is this going to last? Is it going to last months to years? Then it's going to have an impact. But if it's a short couple months maybe, we're not going to be too concerned. But of course, only time's going to tell what's going to kind of happen here. So STM Microelectronics, that's a company that we haven't really touched on at all. So just a real brief introduction to them. At least in this past year, they made $12.7 billion. So this is a pretty big company. But let's take it a quick step further. So this company, their leading customers are Apple, Bosch, Cisco, Continental, HP, Samsung, that's a big one for us, Sony, and Western Digital. Western Digital, they're also in the semiconductors. Probably won't touch on them at all, but I have seen their name mentioned a couple times, so maybe at some point they'll be brought up. But Samsung's the big one because they're one of the producers of semiconductors such as a TSM, so that's kind of concerning. But otherwise, we don't see any companies that really we care about. But that doesn't mean there's not other STM type companies out there that we do need to worry about. So overall, in terms of the supply, I'm kind of on the fence here. So I feel like the palladium issue we're good with, but what about the neon issue? The neon issue, so we actually touch on this. So a lot of the raw materials that go into the chip making actually come from Russia and Ukraine, as we were discussing. The two in particular, neon and palladium. So according to the industry analysts, about half of the world's semiconductor grade neon comes from both those countries. So already we're seeing a reduced amount. Before it was 90%, now all of a sudden it's only 50%. That seems like a good sign if you ask me. And then keep digging down a little bit further. Companies have already been stockpiling key materials like the neon and other materials. I don't know if that includes palladium, but as we discussed, palladium, it seems like there's other countries that have it, but this bodes well. And here's one of our big players here, TSM, one of my favorites. They're the world's largest contract chip maker. They started looking for alternative sources of neon even before the invasion happened. I don't know how successful they've been in finding another source, but they've already been looking. So as soon as those troops started amassing on the Ukraine border, they went out to look for these alternative sources so they wouldn't be caught flat-footed looking for sources down the road. So I don't know how successful they've been on that, but the fact that they already saw this coming, so they're on top of it, and hopefully they're either going to find a new supplier of neon, because as we discussed, even in the worst case, so Ukraine's producing 90%, someone's making that other 10%. Can they pick that up? And also, maybe is there an alternative source to neon? These are questions that, I'll dig into TSM a little bit, see what they came up with. But as of now, it seems like companies, they have the supply because, they've been backlogged. And so they had to make sure they had the supplies on hand so that they could actually ramp up production. So they're actually good. But once again, for how long? 6 to 12 months seems like we'll be okay. How long will this be dragged out? That's going to determine how this is going to impact the industry. It could be another squeeze in terms of the industry and maybe propel them forward. This last article, this one's the big one, and it really could go either way. So let's kind of just dig into it a little bit here. So any items produced with certain U.S. inputs, including American software and designs, are subject to the ban even if they are made overseas. So what are we talking about? This article here is referring to China. So we're going to skip ahead here. So the way I'm looking at it is United States basically, they want to cut off Russia like completely. And as we mentioned, at least in terms of the semiconductors, that's only 2%. And clearly Russia needs semiconductors too. So where are they getting them? And the answer is China. So Russia gets 70% of its supply of chips, computers, and smartphones from China. So what America's trying to do here is they're going to ask China to stop selling their stuff to Russia. And of course, China doesn't approve of this, of resorting to sanctions to try to resolve problems. Even more, they oppose illegal unilateral sanctions without any international mandate. So China's against this. Russia and China, I guess they have a friendship. I mean, it makes sense since they're neighbors, really. So it makes sense that, that's where they make a lot of sales. And the fact that now all of a sudden America's saying, hey, we don't want you to make sales with them even now because of what's going on. China's not really a fan of this. So let's kind of keep going. So Beijing has made self-sufficiency in semiconductor sector a national priority, and they've done very well at this. But for now, its tech companies still rely heavily on U.S. designs and technology. So that's kind of the trade-off right now. SMIC, that's one of their companies, continues to use chip-making equipment from American vendors, including Applied Materials. Even after it got blacklisted by the U.S., that's just like extra material there. But yeah, so that's the trade-off. So China, they're good with the chips. They have their supply, and they have other countries that help them in terms of supplies, such as Taiwan. And so China, basically the trade-off here is, if China doesn't want to listen to us and America says, hey, you know what, then you're not going to get our stuff. And by our stuff, this last piece is what we're referring to. So there's a smartphone maker called Xiaomi Corp. Like the majority of mobile electronics vendors are using Qualcomm, Qorvo, and Skyworks solutions. And then there's also Lenovo, who depends on AMD and Intel processors for its PC products. So the trade-off here is if China says, we're going to call, we don't care what America's saying, we're going to continue selling to Russia, then nothing's really affected here. And the trade-off would be if America says, okay, you're going to keep doing that, well then we're not going to sell you any more of our stuff because we know you're selling your stuff, which includes our stuff, to Russia. And so that would definitely hurt. We have Qualcomm here, Qorvo, Skyworks, AMD, and Intel. That would hurt those 5 companies, probably others, but that's going to hurt those companies because if Xiaomi and Lenovo said, hey, we're going to keep selling to Russia, then America could say, you know what, then we're not going to sell our products to those companies. And so it's going to hurt them. Now, will China actually do that and continue selling? My guess is yes. But so then the next question is, will America say, we're not going to sell these products then to China? So far, I haven't heard anything on that. Not saying that they won't do it, but they haven't done it as of yet. So that's a big question mark because that's going to impact those companies. And as we know, AMD and Intel, those are tier 1 companies. Well, AMD is tier 1, Intel's more tier 2, Qualcomm's on the fence also, Skyworks is maybe like tier 3. Don't even know who Qorvo is. I've maybe heard that name once or twice, but they're down at the bottom. So overall, it seems like the industry is in an okay spot, especially in the near term. That 1 year term, everything seems to be okay. The supply is there. It's just how long will this war last and how quickly can they recover? And then, of course, the question is how long will this Chinese debate happen and how serious are they willing to take it? So that's kind of the issue with the Russia, Ukraine, the impact on the industry. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to be coming out with another video soon. give you some technical analysis on some of these companies as an update, a refresher for the month. So I hope you enjoyed this. Please like, please subscribe. Once again, check out the link in the description. If you don't have a Webull account, check it out. It's a great tool. I use it for my technical analysis, and you can set up an account if you don't already have one. By using that link, it'll give you a couple free stocks. And well, have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.